Hello, thank you for joining me again. Today I am reading chapter 22 of The Children of the Law of One and the Lost Teachings of Atlantis by Jon Peniel. And this chapter is about the death experience, and it's the last chapter for this phase of the book. Thank you for all that have been listening, and let's get started so that we can see what it has to say about the death experience. Okay? Chapter 22, the death experience. As fallen fruit yields the seeds of new life, the self must yield to the universal spirit. One must experience death to be reborn. Birth and death are but cycles of one continuous life. If you take all my possessions, my body, my mind, my loved ones, then what would I have left? My true self, the one, the all? And what would you have? Nothing. Nothing can harm me. I live in my center, surrounded by my life. I die, I live, through the ages, above all strife. Feel, do not fear. Be wary, do not fear. Fear attracts what you fear. Fear invites injury and attack. Fear avoids right action. Fear lives in the dark. Nothing can hurt the true self. Being the wise man or the fool, fighting dragons or surrendering to roaches, matters not. To the fearless one who has faced death and lives in the service of God. Walk with death by your side. Behold the wonders, and new life will be yours. One day, I had the first of what would be many extraordinary meditations. It was a deeper and more profound meditation than I had ever had. While my eyes were closed, I began seeing a circular aura of dim light with a dark hole in the center. It looked sort of like a glowing purple donut-shaped cloud surrounded by a dark void. In the days after that first time, I would occasionally start seeing it again. Sometimes this light would do different things. It would come and go altogether, or might get brighter for a while, vibrate, and sometimes I would seem to get closer to it and further away from it. It felt good. It felt great. And I'd heard things about seeing a light during meditation, but I wasn't sure if this meant the description, if this met the descriptions, or was really the light I had been hearing about. So I went and found Zayn to ask him about it. He was picking fruit at the time in one of the domes. I described it to him and then asked, "Is this the light I keep hearing about?" Depends. Seeing the light can be a figurative for enlightenment or realization, but as you grow, new senses activate also. It is one of the lights you might experience. By your description of it, you are seeing your upper chakras and one of the passageways out of your body. Everyone perceives this a little differently, and some never see it at all. It feels so good when I see it. That's because you are growing. You are getting closer to experiencing the universal spirit directly. You are getting a taste, a glimpse of what will soon be much more. Why am I getting a glimpse? Because you are not letting go all the way yet. One can obtain glimpses of universal consciousness in several ways, including meditation. But these are temporary visions of what you can achieve. They are good to have because it gives you a taste of the wonders that await you and can thus motivate you on your path. But you cannot attain permanent universal consciousness without first having a conscious death experience. You cannot be fully unselfishly loving if you have not had a death experience. Oddly enough, you cannot really live until you have died. Before we go on, let me make something very clear. I'm not talking about real physical death here, just the essence or experience of it. More like the near-death experiences you hear about in the news, where someone gets a severe injury and temporarily die. And what they experienced prior to coming back changes their life forever. But a spiritual death experience brought on by meditation and spiritual techniques is even more profound and accomplished without having to physically get near death to experience it. When you physically die, you always have a death experience, but you don't always need to physically die to have a death experience. A death experience may or may not be accompanied by physical death, as in the near-death experiences discussed above. Excuse me. But for our purposes in this chapter, we are just talking about the experience of death, not physical death, except for my own personal experience, which I will tell you about later. Continuing on with Zain's answer to me. Once you consciously experience death, it totally changes their life forevermore for several reasons. One, the selfish self dies. The selfish separate self dies, and this breaks the hold it has on us. The inner self, the part of you that is the universal spirit, can never end, never die, never be hurt, never be destroyed. Thus, the inner being takes its proper place on the throne of our life, and the separate self stops struggling for control. So the separate self is forever dead and gone within us, and we no longer have selfishness, basically, but not quite. The separate self's death is really only a temporary experience, and only the self-separate consciousness experiences this death. But to the separate self, the experience seems total, eternal, and final. And in fact, it is the final demise of the strange, independent life that took control of us, became a selfish monster, and had us believing that we were really it. So it comes back on you to torment you again. While separate self-consciousness only dies temporarily during a conscious death experience, it dies long enough for you to fully experience oneness with the universal spirit and attain universal consciousness. When you come out the other side of the death experience, the separate self is reset, replaced, reborn, but under the influence of universal spirit in the service of universal will. Author's note. It's kind of like unplugging a digital clock. The memory, the time that was set ceases to exist, but the clock still exists. And when you plug it back in, you can set a new time. Think of it like one of these robot things that are on TV and movies throughout the world these days. One that has been running on a rampage of its own selfish survival programming. If they manage to unplug it, it dies. But then you can reprogram it when you fix it. So when you plug it back in, it comes back to life to do your bidding instead of its own. You have been living with such a robot your whole life. Your separate self. So you see, the separate self actually remains, but once it dies, it ceases to exist as the king, queen, or commanding general of your life that it was, and it takes its proper place as the instrument, the servant of the universal spirit. Can I accelerate or cultivate this experience so it happens sooner? I want to get on with it as fast as possible. You have been cultivating it daily with your meditations, facing your ego, and with disciplining yourself to transcend your selfishness. But the biggest thing that is hampering you now is your fear of death. I'm not afraid to die. Yes, you are. No, I'm not. Then we have nothing to discuss. I'm sorry, I should say I don't think I'm afraid. I don't feel like I'm afraid. Let's see. If you really want to accelerate it, you can begin to bring it on faster. Your vision in your meditation is a doorway. When you see the hole in the center of the light, move towards it, move into it. Eventually, you will enter a void and then see another light, a greater light than you can imagine. Move towards that. Go into it. Then we will talk more. I started working on this immediately, but the harder I tried, the more the violet light donut retreated from me. Eventually, I learned I could not make it come. I could only get it to come by allowing it to. I was passive control, not active. That this thing responded to. Finally, one day, I did it. I entered the hole. All of a sudden, I was thrust beyond my control through it and into nothingness. I felt like I was nothing. I panicked, and I was swept back to where I began, back into my body with a jolt. I now realized I was afraid. I found Zayn again and told him my story. He didn't have to say, "I told you so." We just both knew. And he knew that I'd learn one more time a lesson in humility and respect. Don't fear the reaper. You just began to experience death. It is yourself only who is afraid. It is your spirit that urges you on and loves the feeling. While everyone fears death, this fear is unfounded. The fear of death is created and fostered by the separate self as a means of keeping its control and its selfish, separate life. You must go through it eventually. If you don't do it now, you will experience it anyway, because it is your destiny as a previous adept of our order, especially in your case, being one of the old ones, the ancient initiates. It may be even more intense, but you must experience it, because it will be the thing that finally changes you in many and very real ways. How will it change me? One of these things about the conscious death experience that permanently changes us is when we realize that our true consciousness, what we really are, doesn't end with death. When we thusly experience that our true consciousness not only remains, but also has eternal life, we lose the terrible fear of death from that moment on. During the death experience, our true self also bathes in the light of oneness of the universal spirit. From then on, we know what really awaits us when we die. Then we have the attitude of, so why be afraid of it? That stays with us. We know we don't need it anymore. And if you have positively changed your life and become unselfishly loving, the plane of light and love that awaits is beautiful beyond description, beyond words. And if not, as the teachings point out, the death experience also leaves you knowing that nothing can hurt you anymore, and you become fearless. And so you do stupid things that might get you killed, perhaps, but more likely smarter things that will make your life even safer. But more importantly, more worthwhile, and take the monkey off your back that you didn't even realize you were living with every moment until now. It's hard for one who has not experienced death to imagine how much of a hold fear of death has on us, and how much it affects the way we live our lives. It affects all our feelings, all our decisions, all our actions. It's there with us all the time. Once free from fear, life is lived with great feeling, great zest, great lightness, and great freedom. When you are free from fear, actions are no longer controlled by what we are afraid of. They are controlled by the real you and based on what is right. But shouldn't we be afraid of certain things, or we will be open to or even cause bad things to happen to us and be harmed? Fear can and does have a purpose, but only in its proper place, only when it is not really fear anymore. It should become a warning mechanism only. For instance, when you are driving a vehicle and you see the gauge that says your engine is boiling over, do you scream in pain because of the hot water coming out of the engine, or take actions to remedy it? If we say that our life is like a car on a highway and you see a truck crossing the line ahead and veering towards you, you can take calm, logical, sensible action to avoid an accident if you aren't in the grip of fear. However, if you are in the grip of fear, your actions will be from panic, and you are far more likely to do something stupid that will actually cause an accident. Fear attracts what it fears. If you put a 6-foot wide plank down on the ground and ask people to walk across it, they would do it every time without falling off. But put the same plank across a small pool of water with air bubbles and tell people that the pool is filled with boiling water, their fear will actually cause them to lose their balance some of the time. So, to the contrary of your question and fears about not having fear, the truth is quite the opposite. Fear can bring you harm, and fearlessness can save you. Fear is the way the uninitiated live their lives, not the initiated, not the enlightened being who is one with the universal spirit. I'm still afraid of doing it. No, you're not. Yes, I am. Haven't we had this conversation before? Well, sort of. Why be afraid of death, Peniel? It will happen anyway. Along with transcending our fear of death and realizing that death is but a doorway, comes the realization that your present lifetime, your present body, will die. It will end. And this awareness stays with you every moment you live. Once you experience it, you don't fear it anymore, mind you. You are just constantly aware of it. I know I'm going to die someday. Sure, everyone says they know they're going to die, but no one really thinks they will. They do quite the contrary. They constantly block it out. When you really get that you are going to die, it changes you. This gives you a feeling of cherishing every moment, every flower, every person. And it doesn't go away like it would if you just had a near car accident or such. It permanently changes you. You no longer take anything or anyone for granted. Each moment is new and full, and you walk with death at your side, touching your shoulder, constantly reminding you to live life to the fullest, appreciate it to the fullest, and live the righteous life of a certain servant to the universal spirit, the creation of the death experience. If I avoid this, you say I will still have to via destiny? Does this happen to all students? Each is different. Some who aren't destined do avoid it. How do others have a death experience? In fact, how will it be if I don't voluntarily do this in my meditation now? How does one have a death experience? Well, with some people, like you, like I said, it's unavoidable. It happens to them. Situations bring it about. Sometimes the conscious death experience happens in tandem with a physical death experience. Those who have had near-death experiences that weren't under the influence of drugs, anesthesias, etc., are lucky indeed. But generally, the conscious death experience is the end result of long efforts at spiritual growth. Meditation, self-discipline, working with a true teacher, ego busting, all put pressure on the separate self and corners it. The pain of all that, along with losing attachments of seeing the darkness in the world, all build up, and at some point you just can't take it anymore. This has been called the dark night of the soul. This is the point when a person will either flip out or flip in, according to their free will choice. The self will tell you to run at any cost. Run. It urges you to get away from the source of the pressure. If you do so at such an advanced stage, you can go insane. But if you hang on, if you endure the suffering with patience, understanding, and love, you will have a conscious death experience and break through to the other side. When I experienced this, it was like I was totally engulfed in darkness and depression. And all there was other than that was this thin light thread of my personal teacher's love for me. I hung on to that thread with all the strength I could muster. I just blindly held on, and soon I faced my dweller and passed on to a new consciousness. This must happen to you because you died enlightened time after time, and you chose to come back and do it again. It was your choice. Ancient history. What have I done about it before? Different things, but long ago, it was more ritualized. In the old days, a student that was close to having the near-death experience was given a push, thrown into the deep water, so to speak. For instance, during the days of our time in Atlantis, this was done, and during our work in Egypt, the Great Pyramid was used for such initiation. The student would be given an elixir that stimulated the imagination. Then they would begin to be treated as if they had actually died. They were placed in a sarcophagus. A death ceremony was performed. The rites of death were gone through, and the sarcophagus was taken to what is now called the king's chamber in the pyramid. There, the combination of the student's training, the elixir, the death rituals that were being done to the student, the energy of the pyramid, and the hierarchical guides that would come would all combine and precipitate the death experience. The student would transcend their dweller and be met by the hierarchical guides, who would share their journey of initiation into universal consciousness. The next day, the student that walked in was no more, and an initiate walked out. But this doesn't happen anymore. The hierarchical guides still come when it is your time, but it is just left to the flow to determine the means and time. And the dweller, you have told me of this before, and I have seen in my meditations quite a bit to look forward to. There really is, Peniel. In a wonderful and very positive sense, just let go and transcend your fear. Can you tell me more of the dweller, since it appears we are about to have a date and a meaningful relationship? The dweller on the threshold. The dweller on the threshold is several things. In biblical allegory, it is the angel that was placed at the gates of Eden to keep Adam and Eve from returning. It is the most horrible demon you could possibly imagine. It is nothing but your own separate self. Before you can have a conscious death experience, you must first really see the thing that you have created that is about to die. It is a terrible, selfish monster, and if you fear it, you will recoil. If you give life to it, if you give it life, you will not be able to pass. Only by feeling unselfish love, even when confronted by this monster, will you be able to pass. And what awaits me when I pass? Beyond the threshold. Once you pass your dweller, you will enter a void, a place of nothingness and darkness. Somewhere in that void, you will find a light. Always look towards the center of the light and use your will to move towards it and into it. Do not get distracted by anything that may happen around you. Even if phantoms grab at you, just concentrate on the light. When you move into the light, when you are engulfed in the light, you will be free, be one with the universal spirit. At this point, you will be given a choice to stay on the earth plane and help others, or to go on and remain in paradise. The choice is yours. There is no blame to going on. That is the final bottom line. I never did voluntarily go through my death experience in meditation. Actually, before I even really got a chance, I became very ill. I developed a serious infection, and I began a 30-day fast on juices and herbs. At the end of that time, I was still very ill, and Zayn recommended a water fast. I fasted for 40 days on water. During the last 5 days, I had 3 death experiences, both physical and spiritual. During the final one, I met my guides, and I was given a tour of all things on the earth, all life, the entire universe. And I then, under their guidance, totally reprogrammed my brain. I had 5 days of visions of the future, and then I began my journey as an initiated monk. And each moment has been a miracle of life ever since. Things to do today before I physically die. Until you have a death experience, there is a special death awareness technique you can develop that can have a profoundly beneficial effect on your life, even before you have a death experience. Everyone should constantly be reminding themselves that they could physically die at any time. Remember, you are in fact going to die someday. One of these days, you will be just a few minutes from death. Seriously think about that. Contemplate it for a while. And in thinking about it, think about how you are leaving things and how you are using your life right now. Here are some examples. Number one, if you were going to die in 5 minutes, is the way you have left things with the people in your life how you want to leave them? Number two, are the last things you said what you want to have left said? Number three, have you left anything unsaid that you would have wanted to say before you're gone for good? Number four, with the perspective of knowing that you are going to die at any minute, how important to you is that issue of blank that really irritated you about living with so-and-so, or what so-and-so does, or the things you don't like about how or where you must live, etc., etc., etc. Number five, is the terrible argument you had about such and such really important? Number six, have you done what you needed, what you wanted? Have you done what you wanted to or needed to do with your life? Number seven, what is the legacy you are leaving? What are your last actions, the actions you would want to be your last? Walking with death by your side. Here's a method you can use to remind yourself of death. Personalize it and keep it with you. Live your life consciously aware that death is always standing by your side, only an arm's length away. Then you will live accordingly. You won't live in fear, quite the opposite. It frees you to live life fully. I highly recommend everyone contemplate their death. And it shouldn't just be something you remind yourself of daily. It should be constant, or at least as frequent as you can make it. It really helps keep things in perspective and changes the way you live. When you are always aware you might be dead any second, you really live. Awareness of death begets real life. That was The Children of the Law of One and the Lost Teachings of Atlantis. That was chapter 22 of the Death Experience. Now, there is a part 2 in this book. No, I am not reading that. However, I have done some of the exercises because it is exercises, techniques, how to make affirmation tapes, and so on and so forth, how to contact the individuals of the organization, so on and so forth. So thank you very much for listening to me read The Children of the Law of One and the Lost Teachings of Atlantis. Hopefully, re-listen to this if you want, or to pick up the book. But most importantly, apply this to your life. It, I feel, is very, very important information. So until the next time we meet, have the most benevolent day.